So when it comes to the Gold Goblin, you know what? I think it works for now. But we're going to need to see the return of the Green Goblin eventually. Guys, I'm Mike Spider Slayer. Welcome back to Comic Book Corner 2.0. And this is another episode of Spider-Man Weekly. That's right, guys. This is where I take a deeper dive into your favorite Spider-Man comics that were released for the current comic book week. Today, we're diving into Gold Goblin issue 1, and I'm going to discuss why I like the book so much and why I think we do need the return of the Green Goblin. So if you guys most recently read Nick Spencer's run on The Amazing Spider-Man, we got to see Norman Osborn cleansed of his sins from Sin Eater, and ever since then he's never had the urge to be the Green Goblin once again. Now a lot of readers are kind of upset about this because of the current run of what's going on in Amazing Spider-Man of Peter and Norman Osborn working together. Now, people are upset because they're like, Peter would never work with Norman Osborn, their arch nemesis. How can this actually happen? And if you read the run, you totally understand, and you understand that more in this comic book, why these two are actually working together, and it actually makes sense, okay? So I really enjoyed this first part of The Amazing Spider-Man, and I enjoyed this first issue of Gold Goblin. So let's talk about this book, and then we'll discuss why we need to see the Green Goblin actually return. So in Gold Goblin issue 1, we get to see Norman Osborn struggle, okay? And this is something that you really have not yet seen since Norman Osborn has been cleansed of his sins. And as the reader, you're kind of led to believe that, oh, Norman Osborn's perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with him. And that's not true based off of what you read in Gold Goblin issue 1. And that's what I appreciated about this book so much more, because again, it goes into the psyche of Norman Osborn on how he's not okay, how he has a hole in his heart and he can't seem to fill it. All he does is he thinks about some of these bad things, these bad memories that has happened throughout the years. And the feeling that he's expressing for the first time in this comic book is guilt. And he's never felt guilt before, and it clouds his whole memories. You know, as the Green Goblin, as this villain, right? All he's done is kill and murder people, and he's never cared. So it's hard for him to deal with this guilt. And throughout this comic book, he's always reminded of it, whether he's taking his grandson to the batting cages and you get to see him hit those baseballs and it makes that cracking sound, that snapping sound. It reminds him of the days of Gwen Stacy when she was actually killed. That was actually brilliantly done. There's just certain other things out here that kind of just triggers his Green Goblin persona, like he gets like green ice cream and just all kinds of other things that reminds the reader of what he is. You know, this is almost a very horrific type of comic as well. It's very dark, it's very gloomy, it's gritty, and we get to see Norman Osborn kind of push his limits as the Gold Goblin in this issue, because he fights the Jack-O-Lantern, which is a wannabe Green Goblin type of character, and he always takes it a little bit too far, right? And so it's led to believe that maybe Norman Osborn might not be like this superhero, but he's more like an anti-hero. Now, you may say like, oh, we've seen this before, he's an anti-hero. Yeah, maybe, right? He might be this anti-hero that leads back to the Green Goblin once again. And in this book, it does stress why Peter Parker was hired to work with Norman Osborn so he can keep him at bay from returning to the person that he once was. Because with all these flashbacks and all these memories and all these things that he's experienced, right, he feels like it could get him back into a bad and dark place. Now, what made this book really dark was we get to see Norman talking to his other personality once again, which is the Green Goblin, which is another trigger that could actually lead him to become the Green Goblin. So that was actually really well done. But the creepiest thing in this comic book was when he was going down an escalator and he's talking to Gwen Stacy on what he is feeling. Now, this is a dead Gwen Stacy, and she kind of puts some images in his head, and it's just the descending of the elevator that happens in this comic book represents like where his mind is actually going. So dark, so gruesome. But I really appreciate it. The first issue had kind of like a little bit of a happy ending where he actually got to see kids that admired him and wanted his autograph, which was really cool. So overall, when it came to the issue, I really enjoyed it. I thought this was something that was, again, a deeper dive into the psyche of Norman Osborn, and I did not expect to get this type of comic book. So I think Christopher Cantwell did a wonderful job with this one. I'm probably going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars overall when it comes to the comic book. Now, what do I think why we need the Green Goblin to return in the pages of The Amazing Spider-Man? Well, number one, when you look at The Amazing Spider-Man or Peter Parker, Spider-Man, whatever you want to call it, right? Great power comes great responsibility. When it comes to the Green Goblin, it's the complete opposite, right? There's reign and chaos when the Green Goblin is around. He has no remorse. He has no responsibility. He's the complete opposite. It's just like the Joker is the Batman. That's how important the Green Goblin is in the Spider-Man mythos. You cannot have a Green Goblin. So why does the Gold Goblin exist right now? Well, obviously it's a story thread. It's something to dive a little bit deeper in the Spider-Man lore, to get to know Norman on maybe a personal level or a much lighter level, right? But I think what Zeb Wells is doing here is creating a much deeper and darker path for Norman Osborn to eventually come back as the Green Goblin and have a really solid Green Goblin story once again, when all in reality we haven't had one in quite a while. We haven't seen one in Nick Spencer's run, right? We saw Norman Osborn towards the end of Dan Slott's run, but he was actually the Red Goblin. So when you look at it, when it comes to the pages of The Amazing Spider-Man, we have not seen Green Goblin in his true form in a very long time. So I think this is just we're starting to scratch the surface with Norman Osborn, starting him off as a good guy, leading him into an anti-hero, going amongst the struggles, and then probably him leading to Green Goblin once again. And we're going to get a great story. That's my prediction. That's my thought. Take it for what it is. Again, this is just temporary. We see this a lot in comics, but it's the journey to get there is what's going to make it an interesting story. And based off of the first issue of Gold Goblin, I like what I'm seeing so far between Zeb Wells and Christopher Cantwell. So there you have it. So I want to know your comments below. What did you think of Gold Goblin issue 1? What do you think of Green Goblin, Norman Osborn? Do you want him to return? Do you don't want him to return? Let me know all that stuff in the comments below. If you guys love the video, you know what you got to do. Make sure you subscribe. If you love my content, check out more content right here. This is my latest video called After the Poll, where I take 5 highly anticipated comics, see if they live up to the hype. And of course, guys, as always, keep buying, keep collecting, but more importantly, always read those comics. Guys, thank you so much. I'll see you real soon. Bye.